When I was in my junior year of high school, my parents dropped the news that my dad had accepted a job across the country. I didn't really have a choice in the matter, and before I knew it, I was packing up my room and leaving behind the only home and friends I'd ever known. Moving that late into high school was brutal. Everyone at the new school already had their groups and routines, and I showed up halfway through the year with no idea how to blend in. I wasn't the type to walk up to strangers and introduce myself, so most days I just kept my head down, did my work, and counted the minutes until I could go home. What made it worse was how connected everyone seemed to be with each other. At lunch, the cafeteria buzzed with laughter and conversation, while I sat alone scrolling through my phone, trying not to look out of place. It wasn't like I didn't want friends. I just didn't know how to make that first move. Back home, I had people. Here, I was a ghost. Around this time, Facebook was starting to replace MySpace, so I made an account. At first, I only used it to stay in touch with my old friends. Seeing familiar names and faces pop up on my feed helped me feel like I hadn't lost everything, even though the time zone difference made it harder to talk to them in real time. One afternoon, I got a friend request from someone named David. I remembered him right away. Back in my old town, he wasn't part of my close circle, but he hung around sometimes because of my friend Jerry. David was always quiet, usually sitting on the edge of the group, chiming in here and there but never really bonding with the rest of us. We all kind of thought of him as Jerry's plus one, nothing more. So when I saw his name pop up, I hesitated. It didn't make sense that he'd want to connect now when we'd barely spoken before. But loneliness can make you overlook things. I clicked accept. At first, his profile looked almost empty. Just a few posts, barely any pictures, hardly any friends. But I didn't think much of it since Facebook was still new. Over time, though, it grew. He added more people, updated his profile, and before long, it looked like a normal account. We started talking in messages, and little by little, it became something I looked forward to. He told me he had just started college and was struggling to meet people. I admitted how isolated I felt in my new school. That common ground made things easier, and soon we were sharing details about our daily lives. He'd complain about his pizza delivery job, or talk about soccer games he played on weekends. I'd tell him about my awkward attempts to navigate high school in a new place. What really hooked me was the way he paid attention. If I mentioned I had a test coming up, he'd check in later to ask how it went. If I seemed down, he'd push me to open up. When it came time for me to apply to colleges, he even helped me figure out how to register for the SATs and walked me through scholarship applications. Once, he covered one of my application fees with a prepaid Visa card, saying it was no big deal. To a kid who felt invisible most of the time, that kind of support meant the world. Eventually, we exchanged numbers, and from there we texted constantly. He knew things about me that even some of my real-life friends didn't, and I trusted him with parts of myself I rarely shared. He confessed things too, like how he'd flunked out of college and hadn't told anyone but me. He said he was embarrassed and didn't want people to think he was a failure. Hearing that made me feel like our friendship was something real. By the time my family planned a trip back to my old hometown, I'd known David for a couple of years. I told him I wanted to meet up. That's when things shifted. Instead of being excited, he grew distant. He claimed the photos he posted were heavily edited and that I'd be disappointed if I saw him in real life. I told him I didn't care about that, but he started picking fights instead. He said things that cut deep, personal stuff I'd confided in him, thrown back in my face in ways that felt cruel. I was hurt and confused, so I cut off contact before the trip. When I got there, though, I ended up seeing him anyway. A group of us gathered at a friend's house, and there he was, David, in the flesh. And the thing was, he looked exactly like his photos. No editing, no lies. He acted like he barely knew me, though. He was polite, distant, almost cold. When I tried to bring up our conversations, he brushed them off, claiming he didn't even use Facebook. He said he had MySpace years ago but moved to Tumblr and never looked back. I thought he was lying until we decided to test it. We placed his phone on the table, I texted the number I'd been messaging for years. His phone didn't buzz, but mine did. Right away, the fake David texted me back. That was the moment everything cracked open. The fake account had been meticulously crafted. Old photos were pulled from his MySpace, newer ones from his Tumblr. Some weren't online at all, but were snapshots of his soccer games, clearly taken by someone sitting in the crowd. He even recognized his old dog in a profile picture, the same one that had passed away years earlier. Whoever this was, they hadn't just been pretending to be him. They'd been studying him, watching, following his life close enough to copy it in detail. We confronted the fake account over messages, but there was no response. Not long after, the profile vanished entirely. I thought that was the end of it until months later, when my mom called me. She asked why I had made a second Facebook account under her first name. I hadn't. She showed me the page. It had my photos, some so old I barely remembered them, but none of my actual posts. Whoever made it had pieced together fragments of me, just like they had with David. I reported it, and it disappeared. But I still wonder if the person behind David's fake account had turned their attention to me. It's a sickening thought, knowing that someone could wear your face online, carrying on conversations under your name, manipulating strangers the same way I'd been manipulated. I still don't know who they were, what they wanted, or if they ever stopped. And that uncertainty lingers, years later. When my fiancé and I finally got a house out in the country, I thought the biggest adjustment would just be the space. We'd always lived in apartments, so having a yard was new territory. At first it felt exciting, like a milestone, but the novelty wore off when we realized someone actually had to keep up with the grass. Neither of us had a mower, and I wasn't about to drop a few $100 on one since we don't plan to stay in this house forever. We tried hiring a guy my fiancé used to work with, but $65 every other week started eating into our budget. I figured I'd check Facebook classifieds to see if anyone local offered lawn care at a cheaper rate. That's where I found Charles. His ad said he ran a reputable business and was looking for more yards to take on. It sounded straightforward enough, so I messaged him. At first, nothing seemed strange. He asked for my address to come give me an estimate. I didn't think twice about it. A couple of hours later, he texted, "Damn, sweetheart, you've got a big porch." That rubbed me the wrong way. It wasn't what you'd expect from a professional, but I brushed it aside. I figured maybe he was just being overly friendly and kept setting up a time for him to mow. I let him know when I'd be off work, but he said it didn't matter if I was home or not. We decided on Wednesday. That Wednesday, he messaged first thing in the morning asking if I was home. I told him no, I wouldn't be back until after 8. A few hours later, another message. "Are you home yet?" I repeated myself, said I'd be gone all day. He replied his tire had blown out, so he'd need to reschedule. The next morning, same pattern. "Will you be home today?" I told him no. A few hours later, "Hey, are you home now?" It started to feel less like scheduling and more like he was trying to track me down. Then he sent, "Please don't be mad at me, sweetheart. My truck broke down." I pushed it off again, told him Friday would be better. Friday came, which happened to be my day off, but I left the house early just so I wouldn't have to see him. He texted again. "You're off today, right?" I said yes, but added I wasn't home. He kept prying, asking when I'd be back. Later, he claimed his equipment fell off the truck and broke, so he couldn't come after all. At that point, I decided enough was enough. I told him I'd find someone else. The following day, I came off a long shift at work and checked my phone. I had multiple messages from Charles saying he had cut my grass, and I needed to come home to pay him. I was suspicious, because I hadn't agreed to let him do it anymore, but I offered to send money through Cash App. He got upset, said I needed to hand him the money in person. The way he worded things made me nervous, like he expected me to show up while he was waiting there. I didn't want to take chances, so I asked a friend to drive behind me as I went home. Thankfully, Charles wasn't around, and the grass was cut, so I sent the payment electronically and hoped that would be the end of it. 2 months went by without incident. Then one evening, while I was driving to class, I was on the phone with my fiancé when he said he had to let me go because someone was walking down our driveway. He thought it was just a guy promoting a business, nothing unusual. But when I got home that night, there was a business card on the counter. The name printed on it was Charles. I called my fiancé at work and asked him to describe the interaction. He said Charles seemed startled to see him there and asked a lot of questions about who lived in the house. He'd offered to mow the lawn again, fix the porch, haul off scrap metal, and even asked if we had problems with bats or pests, something I'd only ever posted about once on Facebook. That gave me chills, because there's no way he should have known that. The part that really stuck with my fiancé was how focused Charles was on our dog. From inside the house, Max had barked, and Charles kept pressing. Was he big? Did he go outside often? Was he an indoor dog? Was he nice? My fiancé thought he was just nervous around dogs. But the more questions he asked, the more it sounded like he was trying to size up whether the dog would be a problem. As the conversation went on, Charles circled back to who lived in the house, how long we'd been there, and whether my fiancé was usually home. He wouldn't let it drop. Finally, Mike asked if maybe Charles thought we were the previous owners, since he kept acting like he knew the place. Charles denied it, said he was just promoting his business in the neighborhood. But when Mike watched him leave, he noticed he didn't stop at any other houses. He went straight down the road and drove off. What unsettled me most was that I had taken my fiancé's car to work that day. My car was sitting in the driveway. From the outside, it would have looked like I was home alone. We didn't call the police, partly because I was afraid they'd think I was overreacting. But it's been on my mind constantly since it happened, because everything about the timing and the questions he asked seemed deliberate. It hasn't even been a full week yet, and I keep looking out the windows, half expecting to see his truck parked at the end of the driveway. Most of the people I've met while studying abroad have been kind, helpful, or at the very least respectful. But there's one experience that still sits in the back of my mind, and it started a little over 2 years ago, not long after I moved to South Korea for university. At that time, I was getting used to everything. New classes, new city, new people. And part of that meant dealing with a lot of random friend requests online. Foreign students here get that constantly, usually from locals claiming they just want to practice English or meet international friends. One of those requests came from a guy who called himself Nico. He had tattoos, piercings, and photos that made him seem kind of edgy. His bio said he was Japanese, had spent some time in Canada, and was now studying at the same university as me. Since we shared mutual friends, I didn't think much of it and decided to accept. At first he was polite enough, sending me casual messages and dropping hints about hanging out sometime. But I kept turning those invites down. Things shifted pretty fast, though. His messages turned pushy, almost argumentative, like every reply I gave him had to be twisted into something confrontational. He'd ask if I had a boyfriend, and when I said no, he'd immediately suggest we should date. I told him I wasn't interested, and that should have been the end of it. Instead, he snapped and started throwing insults at me, mixing in graphic, threatening stuff that made me block him right away. When I mentioned it to a friend, she instantly knew who I was talking about. Turns out Nico had been harassing other girls in the same way, using the same playbook: friend request, fake charm, then pressure and hostility if things didn't go his way. One girl even admitted she'd met up with him once, only to learn he didn't actually study at our school at all. He lived over an hour away and would come to campus just to lurk around and meet foreign girls. Even the details he gave people about his background were inconsistent. He told her he was American, told me he was Japanese, and probably told others something completely different. For a while, I brushed it off. I had blocked him. I hadn't seen him in person, and I figured he would just move on. But then came another message, from a different account. This time he claimed he'd seen me at school that day. That rattled me, because I realized he might actually be watching me in person. I blocked that account too, but more kept popping up, Each time the tone grew nastier. Some of the stuff he wrote didn't even make sense, like him insisting he'd seen me in the library all afternoon when I had never once studied there. He insulted me about my glasses, even though I rarely wore them outside my apartment. It was like he was guessing, trying to get under my skin any way he could. The breaking point came one afternoon after class. I stopped by the small shop on campus to grab a drink, opened the fridge door, and when I closed it, he was standing right there, silent, just staring at me. I had never seen him face to face before, but I knew instantly who it was. I panicked, dropped the bottle, and walked straight out. I didn't even head home because I didn't want him knowing where I lived, so I circled back inside the school and stayed near groups of people until a friend came to meet me. After that, I'd occasionally spot him lingering around campus, standing near the exits as people filed out. His eyes locked on me whenever I passed. I made sure to walk with friends everywhere, and eventually the messages stopped. The last time he ever reached out was about a year ago, from yet another new account, saying he'd changed and it had all been a joke. I didn't respond. I just blocked and moved on. Even now, I think about how easily it could have gone further. If I hadn't trusted my instincts that day in the store, or if I had let him know where I lived, maybe things would have been worse. Back when I was about 13 or 14, I finally convinced my mom to let me make a Facebook account. I felt like I'd entered a completely new world. Suddenly, I could reconnect with people I hadn't seen in years, and maybe even keep up with the boy I had a huge crush on who'd moved away from my street. I didn't expect much to happen, but one evening, his name popped up in my friend requests, and I couldn't believe it. My heart raced when I clicked accept, thinking it was a little miracle that I could talk to him again. At first, the chats were completely ordinary. He asked about school. We shared random memories from when we were neighbors, nothing that seemed noteworthy. But then one night, things shifted in a way I couldn't have imagined. The person on the other side of the screen started saying he wasn't the boy I knew at all. He claimed he had hacked the account, and that he knew a lot about me, including things I'd never posted online, like my full name and where I used to live. I froze at my desk, staring at the screen, unable to figure out if I should laugh it off or panic. I tried to think maybe it was a joke. Maybe someone was just messing with me. But then he sent a photo. The image was blurry and taken in terrible lighting, but there was no mistaking it. This was an older man, maybe in his 40s or 50s, skinny and looking like he hadn't slept in days. The realization hit me that this wasn't a prank. I blocked the account immediately, hoping that would be the end of it, and tried to distract myself by scrolling through other stuff on my profile. But less than an hour later, my phone rang. An unknown number. My hands shook as I answered, and there he was, the same voice from the messages, calm but clearly watching everything I was doing online. He said he knew more than I thought and wanted to talk. I hung up instantly, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. I ended up waking my mom in the middle of the night. I printed out the conversations, trembling the whole time, and she told me we'd handle it in the morning. I tried to sleep, but every little sound in the house made me jump. The next day felt normal at school, but I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on me. When I came home, my mom told me that around lunchtime, someone had been at the door, ringing the bell over and over, and even banging on the glass door of the patio. She had seen him, a man standing outside, staring at the house like he knew exactly what he was looking for. My mom immediately called the police and took down the license plate of his van, which was parked and running in front of our house. Later, we learned he was already known to authorities for similar behavior, and he had a record for stalking people online and showing up at their homes. Knowing he had made his way to our house was terrifying beyond words. From that moment on, I completely changed how I used the internet. I deleted friend requests I didn't personally know, stopped posting personal information, and kept my social media accounts locked down as much as possible. Even years later, I check my accounts carefully and avoid adding strangers at all costs. That night taught me how quickly curiosity and a simple click can spiral into something dangerous, and it's a lesson I've never forgotten. I remember a weekend a few years back when the weather was lazy and overcast, and I was just lounging around my apartment scrolling through my phone without any real plans for the day. My housemate at the time, let's call him R, was sitting across from me, messing with his Facebook feed, when he suddenly froze mid-scroll. I looked over and saw his face pale as he stared at the screen, clearly noticing something that didn't sit right. On his feed was a profile that looked exactly like him. Same picture, similar style, but with a completely different name and claiming to live in our city. This other him was apparently in an online relationship with a girl from the US, who we'll call J. At first, we laughed nervously, assuming it was just some weird coincidence or a joke. But R decided to send J a message explaining that she was talking to a fake account. J was hesitant to believe him, because the fake profile had far more friends and seemed more legitimate, so R suggested a video call to prove his identity. When they connected on Skype, J went completely silent for a moment before her face drained of color, and she sent a link to yet another fake profile, this time with my photo. According to her, my fake and R's fake were supposedly engaged online and had 2 children, which made my stomach drop and my brain spin. We were stunned, unsure whether to be terrified or confused first. As we dug deeper, we discovered the shocking extent of what had been happening. There were nearly 20 fake profiles in total, all modeled after our friends, posting updates that mirrored our real-life posts exactly. These accounts interacted with each other, copied our statuses, and even seemed to know details about our lives that weren't publicly shared. For instance, R and I decided to spend a day at Dreamworld, hadn't told anyone, and yet the fake profiles had already posted updates about us being there, complete with the location tagged. It became clear that someone was following us closely, tracking us, and recreating a digital version of our lives in real time. The creeping feeling of being watched grew heavier as the weeks went by. Every time we did something social, meeting friends, going to the store, even just taking a walk, the fake profiles seemed to reflect it online, always one step behind us. We tried reaching out to Facebook, hoping they could remove the accounts, but nothing worked. The police were contacted as well, but unsurprisingly, they had no real leads to act on, leaving us feeling completely powerless. Whoever was behind this had managed to be friends with nearly everyone in our circle, giving them access to private updates and photos, but we had no way to determine who it was or what their intentions were. One evening, after weeks of sleepless nights and constant anxiety, the fake profiles simply vanished. No warning, no explanation, no trace of their existence remaining anywhere online. We never found out who was behind it, and for months afterward, every notification or friend request made me pause, wondering if it could be them returning. Even now, thinking back, it's unnerving to remember how someone could create an entire mirrored version of our lives and follow our every move without us ever suspecting it. It left an indelible mark on how I view social media and trust online connections, and to this day, it's a mystery that still haunts me. A few years ago, when I was in my early 20s, life felt really unstable for me. I was living alone, still recovering from some mental health issues, and pretty isolated most of the time. Binge eating was a huge problem back then, especially late at night when I'd order delivery after delivery just to fill the emptiness I was feeling. One evening, I ordered pizza like usual, trying to distract myself from the loneliness and the stress of school and work. When the delivery guy showed up, he seemed older than me, maybe in his late 30s or early 40s, but he was polite, friendly, and we made small talk while he handed me my food. He might have complimented my piercings or my hair, or even a shirt I was wearing, but nothing that indicated he thought we were friends, or that he wanted to get personal. It was a short interaction, just the kind of small, polite chat you expect when someone is delivering food. A day or two later, I noticed a friend request on Facebook from someone I didn't immediately recognize. When I looked closer, it clicked. It was the delivery guy from the other night. I realized he had probably remembered my name or written down my information from the order to find me online. That realization made my chest tighten because it was unexpected and unsettling. At the same time, I was feeling lonely, craving connection, and desperate for someone to talk to. So despite a small voice in my head warning me not to, I accepted the request. I told myself it was harmless, just a weird coincidence, and maybe it could even be interesting to make a new connection, though deep down I already had a tiny flicker of doubt. Over the next few days, I noticed he started leaving comments on my posts that made me uncomfortable. They were flirtatious and a little sexual, completely unsolicited, and definitely not the behavior of someone who had simply wanted to say hello. I didn't reply or engage with him, but every time I logged onto Facebook, there they were, reminding me of how he had crossed a line from a short, casual interaction into something personal and inappropriate. The situation made me more aware than ever that some people blur boundaries without thinking, and that being polite or friendly during a professional interaction doesn't give anyone permission to track you down or comment on your personal life. Eventually, I deleted him from Facebook, realizing that ignoring him wasn't enough, and that I needed to take my own boundaries seriously. After that, I felt a strange mixture of relief and lingering anxiety, thinking about how someone I barely interacted with could find me and insert themselves into my life like that. Since then, I've had a few other delivery drivers try to overstep boundaries, though never to the same degree, and it has made me extremely cautious about sharing any personal information, especially with people I don't know well. Looking back now, I can see that experience taught me a lot about privacy, trusting my instincts, and the importance of keeping professional interactions separate from personal life. Even though the situation was unnerving, it also gave me perspective. I learned that being polite and kind doesn't mean I owe anyone access to my personal life, and that being cautious online is just as important as in real life. I still order delivery, I still enjoy tipping and chatting briefly with drivers, but I've built a protective barrier around myself and my information. It's a lesson in how quickly casual interactions can turn uncomfortable if boundaries aren't respected, and it's one I'll carry with me whenever I share personal details online.